Number 1. This happened to me my freshman year in high school and lasted until last year. Some background information. My parents are divorced, and I've lived with both of them at different times in my life. I was living with my father, going to a different school district when this started. I was 14 or 15 and started at a new school. I wasn't too worried, as I make friends fairly easy. A week into starting, I had made quite a few new friends and was meeting people through them. Now, I wasn't by any means popular, and I was what you could call gothic. A friend of mine was talking to this boy I hadn't met before, so she decided to introduce us. We said our hellos, and my friend and I ended the brief conversation and headed to the last class of the day. I started seeing this boy nearly everywhere I was at school, but wrote it off as he just wanted a new friend, so I'd talk to him. His behavior changed as I got to know him better. He was very touchy-feely, always finding an excuse to hug me or brush his hands on my arms or hands. I didn't want to be rude, so I just ignored him. He started to become possessive of me and would act passive-aggressive towards anyone I'd be talking to or dating. I decided to confront him when he managed to destroy a relationship I was in, because that was crossing the line. He proceeded to adamantly apologize and say that he was only looking out for my well-being. I told him that while that's nice of him, I could handle doing that for myself. I didn't hear much from him for a few weeks until I started getting strange messages from an unknown number, and you guessed it, it was him. I asked how he had gotten my number, why he was sending me pictures of myself around town. I didn't appreciate this level of creepy and told him that our friendship was over and that I didn't want to hear from him ever again. The text stopped, and I didn't see him around anywhere and felt relieved, thinking I had ended a bad situation that could have progressively gotten worse. Unfortunately, the peace didn't last long, as I'd see him riding his bike past my house multiple times a day, and even woke up to rocks being thrown at my window. This pissed me off, and I confronted him once again at school. This time he reacted angrily, saying that he loved me and that I had to stop ignoring him. I told him to piss off and leave me alone. The next 2 weeks only got worse as I got more and more texts containing pictures of me going around town with friends, and even a picture of my boyfriend at the time and myself walking out of a local cafe, and an angry text accusing me of cheating on him, and other obscene insults. I got manila envelopes filled with angry letters and photos of me in my room. He started showing up everywhere I went and coming up to me, trying to hug me. I'd had enough and told my dad, providing all the evidence. He didn't take me seriously and said that I was only trying to get attention. I told him that if he didn't believe me, then I wanted to go back to live with my mother. After a few weeks of arguing and a few court dates, I was placed back into my mom's custody the following year. I believe that the horror I had gone through was finally over, but 6 months later, my happiness vanished as I got a text containing a picture of me in a local Walmart with friends. I blocked the number and my life went back to normal for the next few weeks. It's summer at this point, and my friends and I decided to have a picnic at the lake downtown. Everyone decided we wanted ice cream, so I said I'd stay behind with all of our stuff and wait for them to get back. I was all by myself for a good 5 minutes when he walked right up to me and said that he missed me. I stood up and started to walk towards the ice cream shop, and he grabbed my wrists, preventing me from leaving. I screamed and shoved, trying to get away. He was too strong, so I brought my knee up and hit him in the family jewels and took off running. I called the cops and took pictures of the bruises on my wrists. I never came across him in person again, but over the years, I would randomly get messages on social media, but I just block him, and eventually he gave up and left me alone. Number 2. A little backstory is needed. The man in the story is the son of dear family friends. I met him at a Dairy Queen when he was eating with his wife and child. He recognized me and my daughter from a picture his mom gave him to recreate through drawing, since he is good at art. He introduced himself and I eventually left, but I didn't give him my name. That is important. So on with recent events. I was on Facebook and I get a friend request from Tad, the man from Dairy Queen. I accept and he starts commenting on every post I make, and some of the comments are not very appropriate. But being as I don't like causing drama, I ignore it and delete his comments. About a week after I accept his friend request, I changed my profile picture and he sends me a message saying he liked it and he thought I was very beautiful. I cut the conversation short because it made me uncomfortable and told him I'd talk to him another time. He told me okay, and he was sending me love, hugs, and kisses. That made me sick to my stomach, so I blocked him from my messages. The next day, my dad called me into the living room and asked what happened because he got a message from Tad apologizing for being a creep. I told him and got angry because even though he knew it was creepy, he still said those things. My dad told him not to contact me again. Fast forward about 2 to 3 weeks later, give or take, and my best friend calls me. I have more guy friends than girlfriends, and almost every picture that I had on my Facebook, I deleted it and you'll find out why, was of guys. We are truly all just friends, and I look at them like my brothers, so I have no romantic feelings for them at all. One particular picture I made that I posted was of me kissing my friend's cheek, and since our families were all together, I tagged them in the picture. So Tad sees the picture and sends my best friend Edgar a message threatening him and telling him he will take him down if he sees him because he didn't deserve to be making love to me every night and holding me every night and a bunch of other weird stuff that I just can't bring myself to type. So of course, Edgar blows up at him and tells him to watch his back. After that, I just decided to delete my social media and just stick to calls and texts. I started to get a little freaked out, but not to the point where I felt like I needed to be with someone at all times out in public. Big mistake. I was at the grocery store with my 2-year-old, and I go down an aisle that has stuff blocking the end due to stocking shelves. When I turn around, I see Tad, who gets right next to me and tries to touch my arm. The only thing I'm thinking is keeping my baby safe and calm. He starts asking if I'm still with Edgar and how he's not worthy of me, and I firmly tell him it's none of his business, and he's married, so he shouldn't be saying inappropriate things to me, and he needed to worry about his wife, not me. The entire time he's talking, I'm trying to inch away, but he's trying to hold my cart that had my kid in it, so I'm mentally going over my options. Finally, after what felt like hours, a group of men come down my aisle and I bolt. I was practically running in the store, but I didn't care. I grabbed my baby out of the cart, jumped in the van, locked the doors, and take off to the gas station down the road where my friend's mom worked. I called my dad and asked him to follow me home and explained what happened. I haven't been out alone, especially with my child, since then, and I don't plan to be for a very long time. I'm hoping, since he hasn't tried to send any more messages, that he's just changed and got the message to leave me alone and realized how inappropriate he acted. Number 3. Long backstory. I have never had phenomenal taste in men. I think that's why I have been single by choice for years now. When I was 18, I was suffering from major depression and anorexia. I was also missing a man I still consider to be the love of my life who had recently moved away. We got back together eventually, but not forever. Suffice it to say, I was in an emotionally fragile state. Enter a man referred to amongst my family and friends as Crazy Paul. I met him online, red flag number 1. On Yahoo Chat, red flag number 2. But this was in 2002, so Yahoo Chat was still kind of a thing. Biggest red flag, he was 35 and I was 18. He lived in the UK and I am in the States. We talked back and forth for months and months and had really fun conversations. We started talking on the phone regularly, and after 3 to 4 months of this, he decided to come here to visit. We spent a couple weeks together, and he was borderline abusive at times, but really funny and affectionate, and honestly, it was a mind warp of a situation. I lost my virginity to him, and I can write more about him if this story gets any interest. After his trip to the States, I decided to go to the UK for part of a summer. We did a lot of little side trips, including a last-minute, fairly whirlwind trip to Paris. We stayed in the city center in this kind of run-down hotel. This was summer of 2003, and there was a ridiculous heat wave, no AC, and it should have been miserable, but bless my heart, I found it exciting because I had never been out of my country before this trip, never even left the south of the U.S. before all this. One of the scariest incidents I had with him was in that run-down, hot hotel in Paris. We had just had relations and were lying in bed. Suddenly, he hops up, goes to his bag, and retrieves this Eiffel Tower cigarette lighter he had bought earlier that day. At first, I thought he was just looking at it, but then he kneels over me, pinning me with his legs, and asks me,
"What would you do if I set your head on fire?"
I started to feel a sick, scared, dreaded feeling and attempted to get out from under him to no avail. He asked again and kind of laughed, and I flipped, started to cry, and my volume level was going up exponentially in this small hotel in the city center. My loudness made him nervous, and he got this disgusted look on his face and defensively said,
"I was only joking,"
before pulling his clothes and shoes on and storming off. He came back after a while, acted totally sweet and normal, and did not mention it again, even when I wanted to know what he was thinking. This was one of many weirdo and scary incidents we had, and I later found out that the "can I light your hair on fire" thing was something he later tried on at least one other woman. We had a sick relationship that spanned a few years, from ages 18 to 21. The grown-up, mentally healthy and strong 31-year-old me would never want to see him again, and I do not know what became of him. Number 4. I used to live in a market town in the United Kingdom, and like every town, we had our town mascot. You know, that one person everybody knows about. That crazy lady that does loads of meth, or the creepy drunk that shouts at strangers. Yes, that type of mascot. The guy everyone knew in my place was called Johann, sometimes referred to as Johann the Guitar Man by the locals. He was an average-sized guy with a dark beard and a happy demeanor, and he was very religious, a born-again Christian. He would often be found on the street corners, talking in tongues while strumming his guitar. He could also be spotted singing one of his songs while giving his posters, every word of which was in rainbow font, to passers-by or waving at schoolchildren. That, and he'd have maracas he would shake at random intervals. I guess you could say he was some sort of pseudo-street preacher. To most, he was harmless, though there was a lot of stories floating around about Johann, and at school there would be frequent stranger danger warnings about him. One such story was that he was in a car crash and he had severe brain damage. Another was that he was initially going to study science at the University of Cambridge, but had a religious experience and gave it all up. By far, the worst rumor we heard was that he'd raped some young girl, but was so overwhelmed with guilt by the act, he'd lost his mind and decided to convert. There were also weird things that Johann actually did do. It was his birthday sometime in July, and he would give out invitations in the street to a party he was going to have. I'm afraid I didn't go myself, though I'm curious if people actually did. His apartment, a place above a shop, adorned with the words, "Jesus loves you," painted across the outside wall, was tiny, and he invited a lot of people. The overall local attitude towards Johann was that even though he was nuts, he was more or less harmless. Over the years, I collected numerous amounts of his posters, and he'd pop in occasionally to where I worked, a local shop, and we'd chat. I even got one of his CDs off him. I probably still have it somewhere. Even teachers I knew would put up his posters in their classrooms. I vividly remember my English teacher displaying rainbow-colored size 36 words stating, "You are all wonderfully loved," obviously gifted from Johann. Anyway, back to me. I had many experiences with Johann over the years, and most of them were pleasant, generally just saying, "Hi, Johann," as I passed on my way to work and school and whatnot. To be honest, I did get funny vibes off him, but I decided to ignore them. He actually lived on the same street as me, so we were neighbors, and I was eventually used to his constant appearances. One particular day, however, he greeted me by name. I had never told him my name.
Good morning, my dear sister HiragiGhost.
I wasn't all surprised by this. He knew the names of a few of my friends, so perhaps they had told him my name at some point. I greeted him in return and told him I was doing fine. I didn't want to talk for too long as I had to get to my friend's house, so I tried to keep it short. We talked about something menial, probably the weather. I made my excuses to leave, and he ended the conversation with,
"May Jesus shower his ever-flowing love on you. Would you like me to bless you today, Sister HiragiGhost?"
I thought this was sweet, so I hesitantly agreed, and hey, it would be a funny story to tell my friend, right? This probably wouldn't take too long anyway. Johann proceeded to put down his guitar and roughly grab me by the hand, chanting hoarsely in tongues. It hurt. He had scraped my wrist in the process, and it was then I noticed he had grossly long nails. It would be an understatement to say I was a little freaked. The chanting got more intense, and then he suddenly reverted to English.
"May the love of heaven flow over HiragiGhost, her descendants, and all those that care for her. May she find a loving husband to provide for her. May her demons be driven from her soul. Jesus loves you, Jesus loves you, Jesus loves you. Bless her, bless her, bless her, bless her."
During all the Jesus loves you and bless her parts, he was leaping up and down enthusiastically while still holding my hand tightly, scratching me further. He was excited, laughing maniacally. He then ended the blessing, if you could call it that, with some vicious, high-pitched mouth trumpeting, like he was impersonating a kazoo. If it wasn't totally terrifying, I would have laughed. He eventually let go of my hand. I shakily thanked him and walked away as quickly as possible. Of course, After all that, I made my way to my friend's place, and we laughed about it, although I showed her my hand and wrist, and she was just as freaked out as I was. However, I didn't rule it as intentional harm, and we both forgot about it and did whatever we were going to do that day. Eventually, I left town and went to university, forgetting all about Johan. But then, through a pal on Facebook, a link to the local news was posted. Johan had been arrested and was to face trials for stalking and sending threatening messages to a girl around my age. It appeared he was angry at the girl for not responding to his advances after he wanted to be more than just friends with her. And in this town, everyone from around 10 years old and upwards generally had befriended Johan. And the messages became creepily sexual, asking the girl if she wanted to taste his chocolate cake. He believed the girl was his wife and believed their love was a sign from God, and they were apparently destined to be together. He eventually ended up threatening to kill the girl, her boyfriend, and their families for crimes of adultery. It turns out he was friends with a lot of local gang members, and he was considering sending them to the homes of the girl and her boyfriend. The chilling words on one of his final letters to her said,
God unfortunately says that unless you give up your ways, he will have to execute you. You've seen all the thunder and lightning. Take that as a sign. It would take just one lightning bolt to finish you off, my lovely.
What makes it even worse is that the girl used to go to my school, and although it wasn't at the same time as me, I used to work at the same place as her. In that regard, I questioned the motive behind all the friendly chats Johan would have with me, and whether he did mean harm behind all the oddly rough hand-grabbing. For the most part, though, I believe that he was a man that needed help, but he was largely ignored due to being harmless. It's a shame myself and my old hometown, including that poor girl, had to find out the hard way. He eventually got detained under the Mental Health Act, and I have to say that I'm relieved for him. Please find news links in the Show More section regarding this story, including a picture of the real Johan. Creepy Mina here of the Worst Nightmare channel. I hope you enjoyed those 4 stories of women being stalked. You don't have to be famous to be stalked. I think some of the problem is we've lost our boundaries. People don't have boundaries anymore, and they don't respect others' personal space. And I think that definitely contributes to the problem. So comment below, what do you think? Why do you think people are being stalked so frequently these days? And of course, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share on your favorite social networking platform. I would be forever grateful. It would help out the channel. Follow me on Twitter as WorstNightmare6 in order to receive advance notice of all future uploads. And always remember to stay safe.